So, is Andy Kotelnicki really going to leave Penn State after one season? Well, he expects to interview for the open head coaching job at West Virginia.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the action going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on the show, but more importantly, be a part of the conversation down in the comments section as we're talking Andy Kotelnicki to West Virginia. I guess if you can't beat him, hire him as your head coach, as they say after Neil Brown was just recently fired. And if West Virginia doesn't hire Andy Kotelnicki, could there be other suitors out there? We'll finish up the show with Penn State. Should they even want to play in this Big Ten championship game? Does it benefit them if they were to happen to lose to Oregon? So we're going to talk about all of that today, starting with Andy Kotelnicki. Andy Kotelnicki expects a report by Mike Acidi of West Virginia Sports Now says that Andy Kotelnicki expects to interview for the West Virginia head coaching job. Will West Virginia hire Andy Kotelnicki? I say no, but he's at least in the conversation. In my opinion, I don't think West Virginia ends up hiring Kotelnicki, but I think it's very interesting that he gets a conversation, that he's a part of the conversation, that he even gets an interview here. There's already other leading candidates that are linked to this job. Jamie Chadwell of Liberty, Barry Odom of UNLV, Rich Rodriguez of Jacksonville State, Jimbo Fisher. A lot of people know about Jimbo Fisher. So there is stiff competition here. Is West Virginia really going to take a chance on Andy Kotelnicki as a Power 4 Big 12 conference program? He has no head coaching experience. And I know, well, you got to get experience one way or another. Maybe this is the opportunity, and maybe it is. But in this day and age of college football, does West Virginia really want to take that risk, really want to take that gamble to go with somebody that has not been the true leader of a program? It's not to disrespect Andy Kotelnicki, but he does not have the same pedigree as a Chadwell, who's a head coach at Liberty that is an established program now because of him. Odom over at UNLV, they continue to succeed. Rich Rodriguez, bumpy through the Power 4 schools that he's been at. Michigan once upon a time, right? But has settled in at Jacksonville State. Maybe he just needs another opportunity. And of course, Jimbo Fisher won national titles with Florida State and was ran out of town by Texas A&M, maybe for good reason. But that's the competition that Andy Kotelnicki is up against. And that's why I don't think he gets the job here. I think West Virginia is going to go with one of them. I've also seen the debate that Andy Kotelnicki shouldn't even want this West Virginia job, which I think is ludicrous. I think is ludicrous. As much as I would like to sit here and say, well, Penn State's offensive coordinator job, it doesn't get any better than that, including West Virginia. No, it does. West Virginia, Power 4 school, Big 12 conference, right? They're securely there. You just need somebody to lead this program, and you can really establish yourself as one of the better head coaches in college football if you can succeed there. So this is an ideal program. That's why guys like Jimbo Fisher and Rich Rodriguez are linked to this job when once upon a time they led Florida State, Texas A&M, Michigan, Arizona. Right? These aren't just these are your average candidates. No, this is a really good list for West Virginia. West Virginia has good resources. They have a decent NIL program. I can't say how good it is, but it's respectable. So West Virginia has the resources to appeal to different coaches, and they'll have the support. That's the Neil Brown effect, in my opinion. Neil Brown was just bad at his job. That was just a bad hiring. But if you get the right head coach to lead your program, West Virginia could succeed at being a legitimate, I don't want to say powerhouse, national title contender. And Andy Kotelnicki can be that guy, but you would have to be patient. Now, if West Virginia is going to pass on him, it's also interesting because would Andy Kotelnicki leave Penn State and join West Virginia early? That's something that they would have to consider because Penn State is in the thick of the playoff race. Big Ten championship, whether that's getting into the bye week, getting into the quarterfinals, hosting a college football playoff game. Does West Virginia really want to take that chance and wait all the way until late December to have its next head coach and wait even further? Penn State goes on a run into January. Andy Kotelnicki's under contract. That means Penn State has the right to refuse to say, no, you got to wait until after the season if they let him out here. I want to frame the discourse in another way. Could this be positive? What is positive about Penn State losing its offensive coordinator? I'm not going to sit here and justify and saying Andy Kotelnicki leaving Penn State is a good thing because it's not. It is not, but there is a bright side to this. That bright side is that this just helps Penn State's perception. Andy Kotelnicki leaving for a head coaching job after one season, even getting interviews after one season, is great for James Franklin, and coordinator jobs at Penn State are going to continue to be coveted. Look at Manny Diaz, leapfrogging forward after 2 seasons in Happy Valley to get the Duke head coaching job. And now you have Andy Kotelnicki in line to interview for West Virginia or potentially get another group of 5, a different group of 5, or maybe even another Power 4 job opportunity. We're going to talk about that in the second segment. But yes, this can actually be viewed as a good thing because Penn State would ultimately lose Andy Kotelnicki, but then the next great up-and-coming offensive mind is going to say, Penn State's an ideal landing spot. I want to go coach at Penn State. So if Penn State gets into another bidding war like they did with Andy Kotelnicki, then Penn State's already going to have a leg up. Hey, if you come to Happy Valley, work with James Franklin, you can succeed and fast-track your career. Fast-track your career. Accelerate your career by coming to Penn State and being a coordinator or rebounding. You fail somewhere else or you don't do as well as you would like. Manny Diaz. Eventually, is that conversation going to extend to Tom Allen? It very well could, but that's why these kinds of coordinators are looking at Penn State as a legitimate destination to either spring forward or have an opportunity to revitalize their career. And I don't know about Tom Allen's situation. That's maybe in another season or two. Does he even want to be a head coach again? But he certainly, with this defense, as well as he's coached them, top 15, top 10 at points in the season. Injuries have not helped here. But Tom Allen should be in conversations like this again for a head coaching job in the not too distant future if things continue the way that they do. Penn State is an ideal destination for top tier coordinators, and that's how this should be looked at. But we are at the point in the college football cycle, I do want to point this out, because once again, December hits and a Penn State coordinator is linked to every possible head coaching gig. It was Manny Diaz, now it's Andy Kotelnicki, so this just seems par for the course here. And also in that same breath, the transfer portal is going to be a hotbed here. And of course, every wide receiver is linked to Penn State as a potential replacement or target. Doesn't matter who it is. They are all linked as, oh, the Nittany Lions need to go and get them. I kid you not, every single wide receiver. But I mentioned here, and that's not hyperbole to say that Penn State's coordinators are linked to every head coaching gig that is available. There are some other ones that are going to be calling Andy Kotelnicki that may not be to the extent of West Virginia, but could be legitimate suitors for Kotelnicki. I'll tell you about more of them on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, just $5, and you will get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place bets, live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you're going to hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, and it's all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And let's look over at FanDuel.com, and you can see the lines for Penn State versus Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Oregon is a 3.5-point favorite Minus 164 on the money line for Penn State, plus 136. The total is set at 50.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them right now over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is also brought to you by Team Ticker. Team Ticker is the one-of-a-kind sports sign for all college sports fans. If you're watching this episode, that right there to my left is a Team Ticker sign. Whether it's Penn State football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, soccer, or softball, and other available schools, Team Ticker has got you covered. You'll never miss a game again, as the high-tech retro display provides a countdown to the next big game, as well as daily updates on the latest team news, stats, schedules, standings, and much more. Team Ticker is truly the ultimate addition to your Nittany Lions sports collection, and once you hang it on the wall, it is going to be the talk of all your fellow Penn State sports fans. If you're looking for that one eye-catching item to showcase your team pride, or maybe a gift for that special Nittany Lions fan, go to teamticker.com and pick up your Team Ticker today. Team Ticker is the one-of-a-kind sports sign, and now they are running a $50 off discount holiday sale. Go to teamticker.com, take advantage of the holiday sale now, and you will get $50 off your Team Ticker purchase. Again, take advantage of that holiday sale, $50 off over at teamticker.com. So if not West Virginia, where could Andy Kotelnicki land, and would he actually leave after one season? That is the question here. I say yes if the right opportunity opens up for him. You don't just take a job to take a job. If West Virginia likes Andy Kotelnicki enough, the odds are low, but if he happens to interview very well, Andy Kotelnicki is going to want that job. He will take the West Virginia job if West Virginia likes him. But I think with all the other available candidates, I don't know that he is necessarily the top guy, the top choice for the Mountaineers right now. What about other schools? Because Andy Kotelnicki is going to be a top choice for other programs. Another one that's been brought up that is in Group 4. And guess what? Manny Diaz to Duke. What about Andy Kotelnicki to North Carolina? Now, Mac Brown was just fired. Of course, the legacy that he built with the Tar Heels here. There's the rumor floating around that North Carolina actually really likes Andy Kotelnicki and that they want to make this happen. The short list of candidates, not as familiar there as I've seen publicly with West Virginia's opening here. But at least with Andy Kotelnicki, we've seen that the ACC is willing to take a chance on Penn State coordinators. Brent Pry at Virginia Tech, Manny Diaz now at Duke, and potentially Andy Kotelnicki at UNC. Maybe they want to get a little innovative here. The creativity with the offense. Now, Andy Kotelnicki hasn't spent any time around the ACC, doesn't really have any connections to North Carolina, but maybe they want to take a chance because that was kind of the difference there. Brent Pry didn't have any head coaching experience as well, but he had connections to Virginia Tech. This is a little different, but if North Carolina likes him, then maybe he's in the top 3 of their candidate list. He's also familiar with North Carolina recruits. For example, top 10 quarterback Bryce Baker, who is committed to North Carolina. Mac Brown, Penn State's actively trying to flip him. He was on an official visit for that game against Maryland. So there's that commonality there that, okay, Andy Kotelnicki is recruiting players that we want committed to our program here. So North Carolina is a possible destination. Purdue just fired Ryan Walters. And why I bring up Purdue? Well, Andy Kotelnicki has shown that he can coach in the Big Ten. Leading a program is a separate thing, but he has at least shown that he can coach in the Big Ten. And that is half the battle. And now here's Purdue's side of it. Purdue's not afraid to hire first-time head coaches. Look at Ryan Walters. Successful defensive coordinator over at Illinois under Brett Bielema. And I got an interesting tidbit about that. Through the grapevine, I heard that Brett Bielema actually told Walters not to, and I have no official report on that. This is just something that I heard in passing through conversation that Walters was actually told to not take that job. So that's why I point out the fact that if Andy Kotelnicki wants a head coaching job, he will get one, but it has to be the one that he chooses. If he likes it, he will get one. Purdue, would he even want this job based on the fact that Walters was in and out after 2 years? They did not stand behind him. They're at the bottom of the Big Ten. They're not as competitive with NIL. Is this a program where he can succeed? You need to go to a place where you can succeed. And I'm pretty sure James Franklin would tell him potentially to, if Brett Bielema was telling Ryan Walters maybe not to take that job, allegedly, right? Then maybe James Franklin would say, Andy, don't take that job. That's different circumstances though. Maybe they learned their lesson. Maybe Purdue's going to change course here. I want to name some Power 4 schools in this case. So I mentioned West Virginia. Iowa State is a legitimate one. Matt Campbell's there. Matt Campbell's the current head coach of Iowa State. That could change because he's being linked to other jobs. And for the longest time, feels like for the past 5 years, Matt Campbell's always the top candidate for another head coaching job at a bigger program, whether that's SEC, Big Ten, I don't know. But if Matt Campbell does decide this cycle that he's unhappy or not happy enough at Iowa State, Andy Kotelnicki is familiar with the Midwest. Born and raised in Minnesota, was over there in Kansas. So he's familiar with all of that. That might actually be a really good destination for him. Again, I don't know what Iowa State's prospects are, and that's a big what if because Matt Campbell's there. So that's not an open head coaching job. Speaking of what ifs, what if PJ Fleck leaves? I've heard PJ Fleck linked to North Carolina. So what if that happens? What if that materializes? Or just another job. Maybe he decides to, maybe it's the West Virginia job. I can't say for certain, but I like the idea of, well, I don't like it because I don't want Penn State to lose its offensive coordinator, but we have to acknowledge the reality that this is going to happen sooner rather than later. Andy Kotelnicki is not going to be in Happy Valley for more than 2 seasons. If it's not this season, it's probably next season, right? So if Minnesota opens up, Andy Kotelnicki, born and raised in Minnesota. Again, familiarity with the Midwest, shown that he can succeed in the Big Ten. That's Kotelnicki's forever job, unless it turns into the NFL, right? I don't know for sure, but Andy Kotelnicki certainly has a soft spot for the state of Minnesota, and if he were to coach the Golden Gophers, that would make him and his family and so happy. You already know that. Andy Kotelnicki is a highly positively emotional guy. That would mean so much to him and his family if he were to ever wind up at Minnesota as its head coach, hypothetically. PJ Fleck's still there. I don't know that he's going anywhere, but he has been linked to other jobs, and it was rumored that last cycle that he was interested in interviewing at other places. No sources, just kind of, what's been talked about, right? UNLV, clearly they like unique offenses. Now that's a credit to Brennan Marion, who was a potential candidate for Penn State's offensive coordinator job last cycle here. But that's if Barry Odom moves up. And I mentioned Barry Odom with West Virginia here. So UNLV, they like to get creative. Andy Kotelnicki's creative. Maybe he goes out to Vegas. Wow, Las Vegas for Andy Kotelnicki. That's why I have this one further down. And Temple. I was going to suggest Temple, but in real time, these things move quickly. So who knows how long this episode's up, and then things even change with available coaching gigs, right? The openings, they're already going to be filled. Temple was one of them. They went after and hired Pennsylvania native and Sam Houston State head coach Casey Keeler. That's a good hire. I actually like that hire. But why I wanted to suggest Temple, that's a decent paying group of 5 job. Andy Kotelnicki is making $1.5 million with incentives and will get raises throughout his time at Penn State. But that's actually, the last head coach was making $3.5 million. That's double Andy Kotelnicki's salary. So don't look at Temple and say, oh, well, it's Temple. Why would he want that job? In the same breath that people are suggesting the same thing about West Virginia. That's a decent group of 5 job in terms of the resources, in terms of the support. They just need a better hire because remember, Matt Rule got his start there, or at least helped build his career, and then made the jump to Baylor, made the jump to the NFL, and then has settled back in at Nebraska, but he's in the Big Ten Conference. He's in the Big Ten Conference, even though Nebraska hasn't seen all this success early on in his tenure. But look at what he was able, so Matt Rule was able to succeed at Temple, and then use that to go to Baylor. Andy Kotelnicki, kind of the same thought process here. A job that it would be good to him potentially, and a place that he could at least succeed. And he's already establishing roots in Pennsylvania. So with recruiting here, coaching in the state of Pennsylvania, right? That's my point. And going to the fact of Matt Rule. I also want to talk about the fact that maybe Andy Kotelnicki won't be the only Penn State assistant coach that is going to be linked to other jobs. I think people are forgetting that there are other coaches on staff for the Nittany Lions that have legitimate prospects. J1 Sider has been patient, has been biding his time to have a promotion of some sort. It's probably not going to happen within the program. J1 Sider in the past has been linked to Florida Atlantic, and it's no different this time around. I think it was about a week, 2 weeks ago, there was an article that said that he is at least on a list of potential candidates to interview for Florida Atlantic. It's a very niche job because he's from the state of Florida. You want to talk about roots. J1 Sider has roots in the state of Florida, and honestly, if they were to offer it to him, I think he would take it. But that's the only, unless Sider is going after an offensive coordinator job at another place, I don't know how likely it is that he ends up at Florida Atlantic as the head coach. But they fired Tom Herman, and maybe they go after Sider because of his ability to recruit. And he's doing everything but being the offensive coordinator with Penn State here. So he's waiting for that ideal job to open up. He doesn't have to take and he said that to me. I asked him about it. His plan is not to take a job just to take a job. He will stay at Penn State as long as he needs to continue to build his career and refine himself as an assistant coach, a coordinator, whatever it is, a leader of a program. Another name, Anthony Poindexter. Remember, not too long ago, he was considered a serious contender for the University of Virginia, and it ultimately did not materialize. They went with Tony Elliott of Clemson, but Poindexter was very close to potentially leaving for his alma mater to be the head coach. And why not, right? Why not? But I wonder if that's going to happen sooner rather than later. Is he in line to, is he going to stick around to be patient and wait for that defensive coordinator spot to open up again? Because Tom Allen became the DC this past off season. Is Poindexter going to want to branch out himself? He's in the similar situation defensively. Him and J1 Sider are almost twins in this case when it comes to their development and their time spent at Penn State and waiting to maybe get that next break, or being even patient and waiting for another program to offer them an opportunity. So that's the coaching coordinator carousel of what could happen if the right job opens up for Kotelnicki. And honestly, Sider and Poindexter too, they will leave. They will leave. They're not going to take a job just to take a job, but it's going to be sooner rather than later that any of those three leave. But everyone's eyes are on Andy Kotelnicki in this case, because those jobs, they offer him the gig. Kotelnicki will accept. He wants to be a head coach. Let's dial it back and bring it to the present instead of the what ifs, the hypotheticals. Should Penn State even want to play in the Big Ten championship? And I'll be honest, I thought about it for a little bit and I said it doesn't benefit them, but that was my old take on it. I have a different one now, and I'll tell you more on the other side of this break. And today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks, and that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier than before. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on incredible seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. You can go to the Gametime app, or you can go to gametime.co on your browser, and let's look at some tickets for Penn State versus Oregon in that Big Ten championship game. The Gametime picks are already sorted for me at the top of the screen. Super deal. End zone level, field end zone level, section 125, row 19, all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. $133 per ticket. Amazing deal. Upper part of the stadium, terrace sideline, section 615, but a lower price. If you're just looking for a lower price, row 22, all in pricing, $41 per ticket. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create that account, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And let's finish up with this debate. Should Penn State want to be in the Big Ten championship? Does it actually benefit them? Because I actually was on the other side of this argument before Michigan and Ohio State had played. Would it even benefit Penn State to be in the Big Ten championship, right? Hypothetically losing to the Ducks. Is it even worth it? You get the bye week now as opposed to potentially, right? Hypothetically later, you get a guaranteed bye now when you're not at your healthiest. You're missing already guys like KJ Winston, Anthony Donko, and Alonzo Ford most recently, right? And you could at least just get a head start on preparing for that home playoff game, right? You're guaranteed now at 11-1. But I'm not against changing my mind when presented with new information. And now that it actually happened, Michigan beat Ohio State and Penn State is in the Big Ten championship against Oregon. This absolutely benefits the Nittany Lions to be in this Big Ten championship game for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, Penn State could be the number 1 overall seed or the number 2 seed. One way or another, they would get the bye if they beat Oregon. They're only 3.5 point underdogs. This isn't going to be some blowout type of game. Should Oregon be the favorite? Absolutely. I can sit here and say that as the Penn State podcast host. No shame in the Ducks being the favorite. But this game isn't played based on the odds, right? This is played on the football field for a reason, and not enough people talking about the college football playoff have figured that out. But if Penn State wins this game, they get the bye week and they get the number 1 or the number 2 seed, right? It depends what Texas does in the SEC championship game. Penn State could be the number 1 seed. That is definitely a possibility. Maybe even if Texas wins that game, because they've already lost. They've already lost to Georgia. Now they got to play them again. So we will see how that unfolds there. But the 1 or 2 seed, you get a favorable matchup regardless based on that how the quarterfinals unfold. Ohio State dropped down in the rankings. They're probably going to drop down in the college football playoff rankings as well. So Penn State, top seed or one of the top 2 seeds, and a better matchup and that bye week later. But that is if they win. Number 2, honestly, maybe the more important reason at this point, because Penn State is guaranteed to get into the college football playoff. And I'll talk about that, where they would rank if they happen to lose that game against Oregon, because that was my biggest concern about playing in the Big Ten championship. Well, what is the point? Is it even worth it? Because if you lose, you're going to get penalized. Penn State can benefit from brand awareness. Another national spotlight opportunity, because the stigma is James Franklin can't win the big game. That's incorrect to say. He can win the big game, but everybody likes to move the goalposts after he does win the big game. It needs to be framed as, well, recently, James Franklin couldn't beat Michigan and could not beat Ohio State. But it is not the fact that, because it is incorrect to say that James Franklin cannot win the big game. He can, but after he wins the big game, everybody moves the goalposts. So that's what it is. The correct thing to say is Penn State and James Franklin struggled to beat Ohio State, and then recently with the run that Jim Harbaugh had, Michigan. So now you get an opportunity to break that stigma, because that's not what people say. People don't clarify and say, for the most part, oh, it's just Ohio State. No, it's James Franklin can't win the big game. Well, this is your opportunity to change that. Beat the Oregon Ducks. They're the undisputed number 1 team in the country. So there's no doubt here, if Penn State were to win this game, there's no mulligans. There's no, well, what if, or Penn State didn't actually deserve it, or Oregon's not really the top team in the country. No, this is an undisputed fact that this is a big game. It's away from Beaver Stadium. It's against a team you're unfamiliar with and haven't played since that 90s Rose Bowl. So nobody's familiar here when it comes to Penn State versus Oregon. This is an opportunity to change that stigma, change that stereotype about Penn State football. That has implications for the way that people look at a Penn State program, and what that benefits is recruiting. That benefits just the whole outlook of Penn State, because Penn State has always looked as that second-tier program. Ohio State and then SEC schools, right? I know they don't maybe not have the best record this season, but Penn State has always looked at second tier to Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, right? When it comes to recruiting, when it comes to national perception about the expectations of the program, that Penn State is in that second tier. You beat Oregon, hey, you're in the conversation for that first tier. You still have to reprove it, but now you're put together as, oh, Penn State can hang with Ohio State. Oh, Penn State can hang with the likes of Oregon, maybe Texas, maybe even Georgia. We'll see with the expanded college football playoff. So that's where it really benefits Penn State if they win. They have to win this game for that to happen. If they lose, it doesn't change anything about the conversation of Penn State because Penn State's in that second tier. They don't fall down. But where could they fall down is in the college football playoff rankings, and I don't see it that way anymore. Originally, I said, and my thought process was, oh, Penn State, if they lose to Oregon, they are going to not necessarily tumble, but then they don't get that 6th seed. I think Penn State is really guaranteed at this point the 5 or the 6th seed because we saw Ohio State move down to 7th, 8th in the AP, and that's probably going to be the case for the college football playoff rankings as well. I can't see how Penn State were to lose to Oregon unless this is maybe a 40 or 50 point blowout, which I am not expecting at all. If Penn State were to lose that way, then that would seriously change my expectations about Penn State if that were to happen against Oregon. Penn State would not tumble down the rankings. Penn State would not tumble down the rankings here. They would get the 5 or the 6 seed, and they would have a home college football playoff game. So this Big Ten championship is not as consequential if there's a loss, it is not as consequential as it was originally made out to be. Penn State can still get a home playoff game, have a favorable matchup, and could host that group of 5 team. And then they face, so if they're the 5 seed, they beat the 12 seed, then they get the 4 seed. Big Ten championship helps them immensely if they win and doesn't hurt them as much if they lose. That's the correct framing in all of this. So the Big Ten championship is a good thing. Penn State should want to play football right now because there is a lot on the line that can help them if they were to beat the Oregon Ducks. That's going to do it for me here on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for checking out this episode. And please let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the conversation in regards to Andy Kotelnicki, what job you think he ultimately ends up with. Does he leave after this season? Does he leave after next season? It's going to happen sooner rather than later. But I want to know your thoughts. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this episode. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, because we're talking about Penn State football, Penn State wrestling, and Penn State basketball every single day of the week here on the show.